listeners, I have a very, very special lady with me today. And to be honest, she has so much that she has been through in her short life that it was just hard for me to narrow down exactly how to pinpoint what this episode is going to be about. But Jess is an author, a caregiver advocate, a podcast host of Coffee with Caregivers, and associate producer of the documentary Unseen: How We're Failing Parent Caregivers and Why It Matters. She is also the author of Sunlight Burning at Midnight, Blended with Grit and Grace, Loving with Grit and Grace, and Caregiving with Grit and Grace, which that has, I think it's been released, right? So this is a beautiful little book that's a devotional. So welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So can you just share your right now story, what's going on in your life right now with your family, and then we're going to dive right into your story and let you tell it.
Right now, oh goodness, I am doing a lot of publicity for the book, Caregiving with Grit and Grace. It's kind of working on a follow-up book. I'm also the executive director of the Lucas Project, a nonprofit that serves special needs families. We are starting production for a second documentary called Uncertain, and people can find out more information on that at uncertaindoc.com. We currently have 4 children still at home. 4 have flown the coop. We created a group home for our son, Lucas, who is profoundly disabled, and he moved into that home last February. So I'm having a little bit of an identity crisis with who I am now that I'm not a full-time caregiver anymore. And I've been married to my husband, Ryan, for 14 years. So life is good.
And so y'all have 8 children between you. And what are their ages now?
22 down to 9.
Okay.
So
So you're pretty much still in the thick of it then.
yeah, we thought adult children sort of flew the coop and it got easy, and that has not been the case. They
No.
almost need like more guidance, but you don't have like the same level of control anymore. Like
That
you can't punish them or have
no.
consequences. So
You're that to me, all these people that say, "Oh, your kids don't need you anymore after they get, out of high school." I think they need you so much more because they have so many decisions and
yeah.
so many wrong directions they could go and, so many paths they could take. So I
And
agree.
bigger problems like
Right, a
that could
lot
be
bigger.
like life altering
That's
problems, not
right.
like you need to get in the shower because you haven't showered in a week. It's more
Right.
like if you date this person, you could ruin your life type of
Yeah,
problem.
that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So yeah, that has been challenging, and it has caused me to pause quite a bit, even in my career and how much I'm willing to take on this realization that my big kids need me quite frequently. So,
Uh, and I tell you, my daughter's 31, my son's 28. They still need you. They
yeah.
always need you. So I wanted to share that with, I grieved so much when my oldest left home because I thought that was it. Oh my gosh, they come back and they stay
Hmm.
and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But they still need you. They still need their mom and dad and their guidance. So anyway, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's go back to your first marriage and all that. It sounded like when you and your husband, well, first of all, you're the oldest of 11 children or 12,
12.
12
12.
children.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's unique in itself.
Right.
And then it seemed like you and your first husband had a fairy tale marriage. I mean, from which I read the book Sunlight Burning at Midnight, which is an amazing account of your story. And I recommend that to anybody who wants to find out more about your story. But but then something happened and kind of all that came crashing in a little bit.
Yeah. In 2004, I went to what I thought was a routine ultrasound appointment for our second child. And it was there that we were told that the baby had experienced a stroke in utero and there was very little hope.
Mm.
It was suggested that we terminate and try again. We were told that these fetuses don't often make it, and Jason and I instead chose to put the baby in the Lord's hands and trust that his will would be done. And Lucas came out screaming with life 4 months later. And after undergoing brain surgery and spending 2 weeks in the NICU, we were handed our baby like with this umbrella diagnosis of special needs and told good luck.
Wow.
And we just went home elated that we were going home with a live baby. I didn't grieve at all that there could be additional needs or disabilities. It didn't even cross my mind. My baby was alive, and I was just thrilled, and we were going to do everything in our power to give him the best life possible. And I mean, we just went home, and it was very, very challenging. Lucas was delayed and everything. He never slept. He had level 3 autism, but we didn't know it at the time. Numerous ear infections, just delayed in interacting or caring about things even. But again, we were like, he's alive. We're good. We'll take whatever comes our way.
Mm.
And so we just settled into life with him.
But it wasn't easy. I mean, I know that the not sleeping and um I mean, I know your husband was a big help too with that. And then you ended up having two more children
Mhm.
after that, which, 4 kids in the mix and one special
Yeah.
needs. That's a lot.
Yeah, after our daughter Mabel was born in 2007, Jason started having all of these health problems. He lost a ton of weight, he was disoriented, his vision was impaired, and the specialist just kept saying, well, you have type 1 diabetes. And it was such an odd diagnosis because he was a personal trainer, a gym owner, a tennis professional, like the epitome of health.
Wow.
And they just kept saying, you have to get your sugar levels under control. And then one night he passed out at home and was rushed to the local ER where they discovered a brain tumor. He underwent successful surgery. We were told that it was only a stage 2, so we could watch and wait. And we were told, often these tumors don't return for 20 years. And we were like, okay, that's it, Lord. You tested us and we're going to get on with our life. And so much so that we ended up pregnant again.
Mm.
And a few months into that pregnancy, Jason's cancer returned, and he went on to fight glioblastoma for 14 months and passed away 1 month before his infant son turned 1 years old. And
Oh,
at that point, I was a 33-year-old widow with 4 children, 7 and under.
oh my gosh. How do you even, when you're in the middle of that, you know, diagnosis and you're pregnant, and how do you not give up hope?
Um, I raged a lot. I was really angry at the unfairness, at the injustice of this life that I thought I deserved, and instead this path that God called me to of extreme heartache and challenges and difficulty and numerous brain surgeries. Like even Lucas had brain surgery when he was like 3 years old or something, and Jason had brain surgery 6 weeks later. And
Oh
I'm
my God.
thinking, this is my life. I mean, Lord, are you kidding me? But through all of it, I never lost my faith. I mean, God and I wrestled, I lamented, I wailed, and ultimately I surrendered and dropped to my knees in exhaustion and said, you are God and I am not, and I don't understand why my life has to be so hard, but I will trust you. And 2 weeks later, Jason passed away.
Oh,
But in that surrender, there was a peace in being able to move forward and be mom to my 4 kids.
I just can't even imagine how you put one foot in front of the other. I mean, and I know that in the book, you were talking about how you wanted to be there for your kids because they
Mhm.
needed you, and you didn't want this to alter their lives to the point of, making it harder for them because they
Mhm.
have already been through so much already. And like, so, a lot of moms, they wonder, like, I need to have my quiet time, and I don't have time to do that because my kids are little and they're always underfoot, and I don't know how to grow my relationship with Jesus or get in the word. I don't have time. So how did you manage to keep your faith and even grow a stronger relationship during that time?
When I was pregnant with Lucas, I actually had this conversation with the Lord because I was so deeply entrenched in the Word and listening to praise and worship music and reading my Bible all day and praying and just like saturating my spirit with God's presence because I was begging for healing for my unborn baby. And as it inched closer to me giving birth to Lucas, I realized once he came, I wouldn't have this time anymore. And I felt like God said to me, "You will worship me with your work, with your obedience to raising this child." And I've always held on to that, even through the busy seasons. Like we do view our worship as reading the Bible and listening to praise and worship music and praying, and we can pray all day long. And in fact, the Bible tells us to pray without ceasing. And that became my spiritual discipline really during those difficult times when I had, 2 minutes to read something from the Bible, and it just became a continuous line of communication with God the Father all throughout the day, and giving everything to Him, every emotion, every feeling, and recognizing that God placed Adam and Eve in the garden too to work, and work was their worship.
Mm.
And so, us as mothers, when we're given our children, that is our love offering, being obedient to what God calls us to do. He knows how hard it is. He knew how hard it was to raise Lucas. And he wasn't necessarily like, Jess, you haven't gotten your hour of Bible reading in today, because I was being obedient to what he placed in my life and bringing glory to his name through my obedience. So that was a game changer for me in recognizing that our only duty really is to be faithful to what he calls us to do and to invite him into every situation that we walk through.
So when I was reading your devotional book, you say that you had a sign over Lucas's bed. And when I read that, it really struck my heart because I think it doesn't just apply to a special needs child. But can you share that and why you put that sign over his bed?
Yeah, that came out of a really, really challenging period with Lucas. He was going through puberty. He was about 15 years old. I had a book deal. I was starting a nonprofit. We were creating a documentary, like really exciting things, God ordained things. And Lucas was homesick and screaming constantly. And he had probably 20 diaper changes that particular day because he had
Oh,
diarrhea. And I was getting really irritated. My go-to emotion tends to be anger, and I'm just getting fired up because I have these things that I need to do, and they're important things. And instead, I'm like knee deep in poop all day long, like changing my 15-year-old son's poopy diapers, and he's screaming at me. And I'm grumbling under my breath about how unfair it is and getting irritated. And the Holy Spirit whispered, "This is holy work. Caring for your son is the holiest work you can do this side of eternity. And in fact, you are becoming more Christ-like in your care for your son. This is exactly what Jesus came to earth to do, was to care for people, care for their physical needs, their mental needs, their spiritual needs." And it just completely changed my perspective that day, so much so that I had a friend create a sign that says, "This is holy work." And I hung it above Lucas's bed as a constant, tangible reminder that that was the most important work I could do here on this earth. And the other things were good things. Like I said, God ordained things, but
yeah.
nothing took precedence over caring for somebody who could not care for himself.
Yeah, that is the ultimate because, I was listening to an interview that you gave, and you said, really, we have in the beginning of our life, we're completely dependent.
Mhm.
And much of the time at the end of our life, we're completely dependent. And if we don't have that in between, that's a big deal that we
Mhm.
don't have to depend on somebody else. But when that one person has to depend solely on you for everything, I mean that gives you a whole different perspective that, you wouldn't want to be their lying helpless and not being able to help yourself,
Mhm.
but you have the privilege of being able to help that person. Um, and so I thought that was really good. So I know you talk about being angry, but you also talk about a surrendered hallelujah, and that it's easy to grow bitter and resentful when you're in the middle of caregiving. And this, I mean, you weren't just caregiving for your son, you were caregiving for your husband through his 14 months of the brain cancer and trying to keep up with you were caregiver for those children because your son
Mhm.
was what, 8 when he passed away? Your oldest son was 7 or 8 when he passed away?
7. So
7.
yeah, yeah, I mean, 4 children who absolutely needed care, and um, it was overwhelming, and it really required a daily surrender on my part. Like I said, when I fell to my knees and just said, "You are God and I am not," and I had to, and I think I've been doing that now for 14 years, even through every aspect, every twist and turn of this new life that I've been given, recognizing that I do need that daily source of strength and that daily manna, and inviting Father, Son, and Holy Spirit into my life every day to provide me with what I need, um, because we can't do it on our own. And I I don't know that I totally grasped that even when Jason was going through cancer, but 14 years later, I totally understand my dependence on God for our daily bread.
Mm. And you talk about how we're all made for eternity. And instead of seeing Lucas as broken and even your husband not being healed from the brain cancer, share about that, how we should look instead of being broken, that we're made for eternity.
I mean, Jason, I begged for Jason's healing. I didn't understand how the best plan couldn't be me and Jason raising our 4 children. And um, through a lot of wrestling and processing with the Lord, I've realized he received the best healing that God could give him. He is now completely cancer free and walking with the Lord throughout all eternity. And it was my selfish desires, really, that wanted him to stay here on earth with me. And Lucas, too, I was given my worst case scenario with Lucas. I did not want a profoundly disabled child who required total care. And I actually told the Lord that when I was pregnant with him, if that is your plan, please take this baby to heaven and heal this baby because I'm not the right person to raise this child. And God said, yes, you are.
Mm.
And the healing that I've experienced in my life through raising Lucas and recognizing that Lucas is exactly as God intended Lucas to be. He is the most humble individual on this planet. He has no ego or pride or doesn't care if anybody in the world knows who he is or his name. And his life, his story has changed so many circumstances for so many people and given hope and encouragement through, the books that I've been blessed to write and the documentary and the namesake of the nonprofit that I started, the Lucas Project. And he doesn't care about any of these accolades or glory. And his whole life just screams glory back to God. So Lucas is just happy as can be in his little Lucas world with his veggie tales. And sometimes I think he's probably closer to heaven than any of us could ever be because he doesn't carry those cares of the world like the rest of us do.
Yeah, yeah. His treasures in heaven, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's what's important to him. Um, so I want to go jump ahead a little bit. So after your husband passed away, I know that, or I'm trying to remember if I read this right, but did your husband encourage you to marry again?
His mother did.
His
Um,
mother did. Okay.
at the funeral, Jason's mom pulled me aside and said, Jess, I just want you to know I'm praying for your next husband.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And she said, I know you can't do this life alone with these four kids. And I was hopeful that that would be part of my story. I really enjoyed marriage, and um, I would have loved to have gotten married again. And 3 months later, I actually met my next husband.
Wow,
Uh,
3 months,
three
3 months.
months. Yeah, she was tracking with the Lord in a way that I was not quite there yet.
I can understand.
Yeah, but she recognized something there that I didn't quite see, and what a gift that she gave me in that permission to even be open to that. And I had blogged through Jason's 3-year cancer journey. And 3 months later, I opened my blog to see a comment from a stranger in Pennsylvania. She just said, Jess, I have no idea why I'm asking you to do this, but I'd like you to check out this guy's blog. He's a widower. He lives in Oklahoma. He lost his wife 4 days after Jason died to brain cancer, and he has three young children. He's not doing very well. And so I found his blog and just left a comment. And I woke up the next day to an email from this man in Oklahoma. And those emails turned to phone calls, which turned to eventually meeting in person. And we were married in April of 2011. So um,
So how much,
you
how
can
long
do
was
the
that
math.
after?
August, September, October, November, December, January, February. 8 months later. Um,
Oh gosh. So God didn't leave you, you know, trying to figure it all out on your own. And the thing is, blending families, that's hard.
it is hard.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. And losing a spouse, that's so hard. And having a special needs child, that's really hard. And
Hmm.
the odds are against you and your husband. His name is Ryan, you said?
Ryan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, first of all, did he hesitate when he heard your story and he met Lucas? Was there any hesitation at all?
Everybody always asks if Ryan hesitated. Nobody ever asks if I hesitated.
Did you
It's
hesitate?
it's always poor Ryan. Did he hesitate?
Sorry. Yeah, you had three kids too to bring into your four
Exactly.
kids. I'm sorry.
No, I've never been asked that question. He did not, and the way he'll say it is, I fell in love with Jess, and it was a package deal, and we were just both. It was God ordained, and we just both were being obedient, and there was a very deep, passionate love there too that um, sustained us. And yes, blending families is very, very challenging, particularly in those first couple of years. 14 years later, I would say it looks very different than those first couple of years. Like those insecurities are gone. We've built a foundation, we've built a history together, we had a child together, we've raised all these children together. But in those early days, you don't have any of that. And so you're sort of following in the shadow of this sainted individual, really, because we
Right.
both brought that sainted individual into our relationship too. And I mean, it is messy and murky, but by the grace of God, we got through it. And going on 14 years this April. So, um,
So, are there certain things maybe that you went through with trying to blend your families that, first of all, where were you from? Because he was from Oklahoma. Where did you live?
I was in Michigan.
So, where did you both end up?
So he moved to Michigan for about 2 years, and then he was like, I don't really like the snow. Let's find a place of our own. So we moved to rural Tennessee
Okay.
for about 7 years until it just became way too challenging with Lucas, and then we moved back to Michigan.
Okay. So, what were some of the challenges as far as blending the families?
I think in terms of the kids, it went really smoothly. They were all so young, and they were really excited about having a new mom and a new dad and new playmates. So they all of a sudden had all these built-in playmates. And I think had they been older, it would have been much more challenging. But for me and Ryan, because it went so quickly, we used each other as therapists almost to work through things related to our former relationships, and to even work through and process our grief. And that was not the wisest idea, because you're like grieving this former spouse and falling in love with a new spouse, and it gets really weird. And so we should have gotten like some therapists to work through some of those feelings individually so that we could come together and be our best versions of ourselves. And I write about a lot of our issues in Blended with Grit and Grace, the second book that I wrote. And then I really struggled because all of a sudden now I'm living in this home with all of this other woman's stuff everywhere.
Oh, wow.
And so that became like, and am I allowed to touch the stuff in my home, which in my first marriage, it was just my home. I'm the wife, I can decorate, I can do whatever I want to do. And that was really challenging to work through. Like, I don't even like some of this decor. Why is it in my house? Like type
Mhm.
of feelings. And we got there. I'm very much a communicator. Ryan wasn't so much a communicator until he met me, and then he became a communicator. So we got there, and he eventually understood, how uncomfortable that made me feel to have like a house full of stuff that wasn't even mine or but again, it's that shared history,
Mhm.
those insecurities, I think, rear their ugly heads when you don't have that history together, you don't have that trust, that respect. And as the years went by, all of those things grew, and like none of these things are at all an issue anymore.
Wow. And so was your son the oldest or?
Caleb, yeah, my
Yeah.
oldest, and then his Tate was 6 months younger than Caleb.
Okay. All right.
So
So,
at one point in the year, we have three sets of twins
oh, wow.
where they're all the same age. Yeah.
Wow. So, because that is a thing, a lot of times the children do get attached to things that belong to that parent that they lost. So
Mhm.
I guess that really was a blessing that probably, I mean, maybe there were a few items, but for the most part, I would think they don't really think about it that much at that age. I mean, do you agree or?
It wasn't even really about that. Like the kids had all of their stuff in their rooms. That wasn't the issue at all. It was my husband knew how much he had paid for like certain gifts.
Ah,
So like there's a chapter in my book called Red Pots. He had purchased her this beautiful set of red Teflon pots for their anniversary. And I was like, I don't want these pots. Well, they're really expensive. They're really good pots. You should keep them. And I said, I don't even believe that Teflon's a healthy product.
yeah.
I don't want these. I don't like the color red. I don't like Teflon. I don't want these pots. Well, what are we going to do with them? I said, well, we'll donate them. I
Yeah.
don't want these pots. And he was just so fixated on keeping like certain things that he had purchased because he knew how much he had spent on them. And eventually he was like, the mental anguish my new wife is giving me is not worth any amount of money I spent on these items. So give them to Goodwill. I don't care anymore.
But you don't really think about that as much.
Right.
And I know my daughter and her husband, they were older when they married, so they had been single for a good while, and he had his stuff and she had her stuff, but there was no other spouse involved
Yeah.
that they had to worry about hurting somebody's feeling or, make it
Right.
emotionally difficult or anything. So that's a whole nother level
It
right
is.
there. So I want to go back to Lucas, and one thing that you've said is you talk about restraining, how we must remember the dignity of our loved ones and practice restraint when sharing our personal lives with others. Allow the Lord to use your companions to minister to your weary heart. And I think that's something that a lot of us probably don't think about, how we make others feel if we complain about what's going on when we're caregiving or how difficult they might be or some of the struggles that we're having to deal with as we walk with them. So, share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't always do it correctly and I overshared on Facebook, and social media. And then recognizing, I think, the motive behind oversharing. And the Lord's been really doing a deep work in me lately about our egos and pride and how much even those posts are about like, look at me, look at
Mm.
how strong I am, look at all the things I'm doing to care for this person or this individual. And I'm just really seeing in our whole culture, just this almost ego idolatry where we are so fixated on having constant eyeballs on us, affirming us and recognizing our struggles um, and realizing that that's not how Jesus operated. He often operated in those hidden spaces.
Yeah.
And if I want to be Christ-like, I don't need that affirmation from the whole world and all the strangers. And that's not to detract at all from finding a few very trusted confidants that you can be very honest and vulnerable with, who will pray with you.
Mm.
But I think in sharing all the nitty-gritty details, we are, in essence, almost throwing our pearls to pigs.
Mm.
Like these are holy, sacred moments that the whole world does not need to be privy to. And I learned that the hard way, but I'm hopeful that other caregivers can see that lesson that I learned and do it differently than I did.
That's hard. That's hard because we do fall into the pity party and why me, and especially, you and your husband, y'all have both been through a lot in your
Mhm.
lives, and it would be easy to fall into that pity party. So I think having some really good trusted friends but how do you do that? Because I can hear somebody out there saying, listen, I'm by myself in this. Like, I can't leave. I can't go
Mhm.
find new friends because I'm caretaking all the time. So what would you recommend for somebody who's really struggling with that?
Yeah, first going back to even the posting, I think you always have to ask yourself what the motivation is behind the post. And if it does go back to your ego and your pride and wanting that like attaboy pat on the back,
Yeah.
like, wow, you're so amazing, then it is rooted in pride.
Mm.
And for those individuals, I mean, I lived in that space for years and years, and Voxer was amazing. I still love Voxer, which is like a walkie-talkie app on your phone. My best friend and I walk every single day to Voxer. Like we pray for each other, we encourage each other, we uplift each other. Text messaging and online support groups. The Lucas Project does offer a free online support group for caregivers called Caregivers Cove. And you can find information on that at thelucasproject.org. But having that trusted community to surround you and people who do understand what you're going through, because when we open ourselves up so vulnerably and honestly to the whole world too, most of the world doesn't have any comprehension. And even like Lucas slept in a safety bed for years to keep him from harming himself and to keep from eloping. And I posted about that and got a lot of negative feedback about
Oh,
keeping him in a cage. But this was like a safety bed that Medicaid purchased for him.
mm.
So just in recognizing that the whole world doesn't really understand and they don't want to understand. And so why open ourselves up for that kind of negativity and why open ourselves up to lose our peace in that way?
Mm.
When the Bible says, like, above all else, pursue a peaceful life. And that just wasn't fulfilling that desire for me anymore.
So the first thing you started was the Lucas Project, is that right?
Yeah, yes. Well, I wrote Sunlight Burning at Midnight first, and I think
Okay.
blended with Grit and Grace, and then the Lucas Project.
Okay, so talk about how the Lucas Project came about.
We were living in rural Tennessee, and Lucas was going through puberty and becoming very aggressive, nonverbal, incontinent, lots of behavioral challenges. He was lashing out at me, he was lashing out at his siblings. And Ryan actually ended up in the local ER with panic attacks that resembled heart attacks. And they wanted to do a PET scan on him because he had lost so much weight
Oh,
and
no.
was going through all of these health problems. And I'm thinking, are you kidding, Lord? You moved me out to the
Oh,
middle of nowhere with 8 kids, and now I'm going to have another husband who's diagnosed with
wow.
cancer. Come to find out, everything was clean and clear, but it was the stress of our life. the isolation. There just weren't any resources or support for families like ours. And when Lucas was little, it was easy to find help for him because he was adorable. We could still kind of manage him. And a 5 or 6 year old in diapers, that's not like a big deal to people. But when you're 16, 17, 18 and in diapers,
Yeah.
nobody's going to touch that.
Mm.
So we just didn't have any help or support. And I thought, if we're this desperate for resources, other parents must also desperately need a break. And so I Googled how to start a nonprofit and filled it, printed off the paperwork, filled it out. A few weeks later, I was like a nonprofit founder. I was like, okay, what are we going to do now? So we ended up partnering with a local school and we offered once a month free of charge respite days to special needs families where they could drop off their kids for a 5 hour chunk of time and just go on a date or take a nap or run some errands or whatever they wanted to do just to get that break. And we took full advantage of it too. Like I was not directing this program. I hired a director and we dropped Lucas off and
Oh,
picked him up
good.
5 hours later.
Good
Like
for you.
I was like, I needed this and that's why I started it and I'm going to take advantage of it. And that was a game changer for a while until COVID hit.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that threw a big monkey wrench
Hmm.
into it.
Yep.
So, is this something that is nationwide or is it just a local thing or how does that work?
Well, we have a 3-tier mission statement, which is recognition, resources, and respite. A lot of our resources are nationwide, like the Caregivers Cove support group. We have a resource database on our website with over 350 resources. And then the documentaries, of course, are also nationwide projects. And then we do offer care packages where you can nominate a caregiver on our website, and we will send a care package that just
Oh,
says, we acknowledge you, we see the hard and holy work you're accomplishing type of thing. And then the respite, we are in the process of starting a respite center here in West Michigan that we hope will eventually become a model that we can use nationwide, but we're just in the planning stages of that right now.
so you really only started this how many years ago?
I think it was 2017 when I
Okay.
started it in Tennessee, and then I had to transfer it to Michigan when we moved here.
Yeah. So then was the documentary next? Is that the next thing that you did?
Yeah, that was part of the Lucas project, that recognition portion, just trying to figure out like how are we going to make society aware of our struggles. And that's when I started the podcast Coffee with Caregivers and started speaking nationwide about some of the struggles. But I wanted like a bigger format to really bring society into what our lives look like. And that's when we started the documentary.
Because I think from an interview you gave a couple of years ago, 16.8 million, there are 16.8 million caregivers for
Hmm.
children. Is that,
Hmm.
and I'm
This,
sure it's much more than that even now, but
yeah,
that's a big part of the population that's really probably struggling just to get through
yeah,
and
it is.
need help.
And part of that, we have the ability now to save these babies that would not have lived 100 years ago, but we are able to save them, but that it often comes with a price. They often have disabilities and with autism rates soaring, it's now, I believe, 1 in 35 individuals will be diagnosed with autism this year. So we will have a tsunami of caregivers who are going to need the support and resources as the years go on.
Wow. So this is very important work that
Hmm.
you're doing to try to relieve some of this. Did your husband, has he felt better, recovered from all of the panic attacks and everything?
He
And how's he
has,
doing now?
yes. We eventually moved from our what we thought was our dream home in Tennessee. We had purchased this big abandoned house on 30 acres of land, and he renovated the whole thing, and raised our 8 children and chickens and gardens. And we realized like it will kill us if we stay here. We were so desperate for community that that big, beautiful home started to feel like a tomb. And we thought if we don't get out of here, we're going to die. And so we packed it up and came back to Michigan, where we at least had the support of friends and family. And Michigan's really good about resources too for families like ours. And that's when we eventually created the group home for Lucas. So life has been very different this past year. There's, like I was saying to you, there's all this space that I'm not really sure what to do with. And you're like, rest. I'm like, I don't know that I know how to rest. I feel like I should write another book or
I
something.
think you need to rest. So talk about the home that Lucas is in now.
Yeah, we started planning. Well, I started researching in Tennessee because we knew that our best life would not be to have Lucas in our home for the rest of our life. And with his aggression and even his siblings, like I started to notice them like jump away from him because he would reach out and grab their hair or hurt them, not intentionally, but just like he would want help and he'd grab their hair. And we started to realize that saying yes to being Lucas's full-time caregiver for the rest of his life would be a no to so many other areas of our life, including our other kids and our marriage and travel and grandchildren. And so I just started doing a deep dive into what would that look like if we created a group home for him. And we ended up moving to Michigan, and I set up a search with a local realtor. And our plan was like by the time he's 25, we'd like to have something created. And it just went really, really quickly. The perfect home fell in our laps. It was super affordable and nobody wanted it because there were two homes on the property that the township wouldn't allow us to split. There was an old abandoned farmhouse and then a big sprawling ranch. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, the one could be for the caregivers and one can be for the
Wow.
individuals who need care.
Yeah.
So we purchased it, and even that was so funny. I called the realtor and said, I'd like to close on Lucas's birthday. And she was like, oh, okay. And so she called the seller's realtor and they were like, well, what's the date that they want to close on? And she said August 12th, that's Lucas's birthday, and that would just be really meaningful to the buyers. And the seller started to cry and she said, my birthday is August 12th. So
Wow.
it was just such a God thing, like God's stamp of approval. This is the way you should go. And so we purchased that home, and my husband spent the next year completely renovating it. It didn't work for a year. That was a massive sacrifice. And then we moved four individuals into it last February, March, April. We staggered their moves, and now there are four young adults living there with full-time care.
How did you raise the funds to buy the property?
Um, we we had our life savings that we completely depleted, and then there we had an anonymous investor who actually allowed us to take out a loan. So we were able to purchase it that way.
Wow. I can't imagine the paperwork and all you have to do to set up something like this for, not only your own child, but other children that are coming to, or well, young adults, I'm sure at this point, coming to live in the home. I mean,
Yeah,
how hard was that to set all of that up?
it about made me insane. It was I I I always think I've walked through the most challenging thing in my life until something new comes along. And I mean, even the battles with the state over like Lucas's safety bed, for instance. We had to battle that and battle that and battle that. My husband made him this incredible custom bed where you like open the door and you climb into this big cozy space that Lucas loves because he has autism and he loves these cozy comfortable spaces. And so this is the only bed he's ever slept in. And so we recreated this bed at Hope Farm, and the state was like, oh no. And we were like, why? He can open the door, he can climb in, he can open the door, come back out. Well, it's restrictive. So we fought that and we won. We've been told that it's the first bed in the state of its kind. So that felt like a nice victory. But yeah, some of the rules are so dumb too. Like you can't even imagine. I mean,
I know.
that's part of the next documentary that we're creating. Just the rules that might apply to a mild or moderate disabled individual, but should not apply to like a profoundly disabled individual. For instance, like needing to set up a smoking section. for the residents who don't even know how to use a toilet, but
Wow.
they're somehow going to be able to take up smoking at some point in their life.
And not that you want to encourage that anyway.
No, but because of recipient rights, they have the right to smoke if they want to.
Wow. That
So absurdity.
that is. I just interviewed a lady, Tori Hope Peterson, recently, and she was in 12 different foster homes from 12 to 18, and she was sharing some of the things, and I read her book too, and it was just ludicrous,
Mhm.
the things that the state required. And I'm like, gosh, have these people really investigated this to make these rules that shouldn't apply to these situations?
Right.
It's hard to, I don't know. It's hard to have patience with things like that sometimes.
I mean, they're very blanket rules, and they need to be customized much more
Right.
for each individual situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you feel like this is something that's going to grow, or what do you feel like
A
is the
year ago, I would have said, absolutely, I will never do this again. And now I'm starting to feel a little bit of a prodding to create more housing now that we've figured out how to do it. If we could find an investor who would help us purchase more homes, I think we would definitely welcome the opportunity to create more housing.
I think it's a obviously a very big need, and
Mhm. Oh, it's huge.
especially even if they don't have severe special needs. I interviewed a lady a couple of years ago who has a daughter with autism, and it's not severe, but she was getting to the point where she was graduating school, and she, they you don't know what to do.
Mhm.
You're having to rely on the state to figure this out. And anyway, it's I feel like it's such a hardship on the parents to try to have to figure out the best thing for their child. It just seems like there needs to be more available that
Yeah.
seems like it's good for the child and the family, where you don't feel like you're, banishing them, or, they still
No.
caring environment. And
Oh,
because
Lucas is thriving. I
that's
mean,
awesome.
because these staff members have more energy. I mean, they're young. They haven't been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like he's learning new skills. I mean, and they're mostly like his age. They're college students who are
Wow.
going into special education or physical therapy, or so they're super passionate about helping him gain more independence. And he's 10 minutes away from us. We see him
Oh,
often. He's doing remarkably well. And uh, I had no idea like how well he could do apart from my care, but that was God almost working on my heart in that way too. Like my identity almost became idolatry. And if I don't trust God to care for my son, then I'm trusting in myself over the Lord, and that's a problem.
yeah. Um, Yeah, that is. And so many times we do that.
Mhm.
We think we
Yeah.
can figure it all out, and then it's like, no, no,
Yep.
no matter how hard you try. But so I was reading through your book, and there was a day that it's called Multiply My Needs. And I think it was day 13 in your book, Caregiving with Grit and Grace. And you talk about how Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, distributed it to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. And then you were reading that verse and you realized that you had the authority to ask the Lord to multiply the precious commodities that you didn't have. Like, you weren't able to sleep when you needed to sleep, and some of the other things, the exhaustion and trying to be productive in the limited time that you had. So can you talk about that? Because I thought I've never really thought about God, um, you know, expanding the loaves and the fishes when it comes to our energy or our sleep or things like that.
Yeah, it struck me too when I read it. Like, is it really this simple? Like, why don't we ask?
Mhm.
And as believers, we don't. I don't know if we think God's too busy or just isn't going to care, but it says too, if he who asks for a good gift, like, is his father going to give him a stone. I'm sure I'm butchering that verse, but like these are good gifts. We need sleep, we need time, we need energy to be able to care for our loved ones. And so, why wouldn't God honor that request? Why wouldn't He multiply those commodities? And so, it just became a simple prayer of faith. Lord, I need more sleep, I need more time. And remarkably, He has been faithful to provide that. And I just think it goes back to really like the faith of a child. Like we think it's just too simple. And God's like, no, just come to me in your simplistic faith and in your humility and ask, and you will receive. And it's not like a magic potion or anything. It's just recognizing that He is our sustainer,
Hmm.
and He will provide. And so I just think it would be foolish to not ask.
Yeah,
Like, what's the worst he can say? No. I mean,
right.
ask. You might get it, and then you might feel amazing.
Yeah, and you saw that when you asked God that. And so
I
I
see that all the time. I see it repeatedly. I mean, it really, even I was sharing with you yesterday, I wasn't feeling very well. I had a raging migraine. I was just laying in bed because I had a bunch of interviews today, and I was like, Lord, just please heal me. Because just humbly asking, I know you have the power to heal me so that I can do these interviews that I have scheduled. And but it's humbling ourselves and recognizing our own insufficiencies. And that can be hard sometimes.
it really can. And I have to be honest too. I almost canceled our interview this morning because I've been fighting the sinus infection for the last since before Christmas. And it just this last couple of weeks has hit me hard. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can get a shower today, much less do an interview. But I just said, God, this is yours. This is your interview. This is your podcast. It's not mine. I can't control it. And
Mhm.
so he has given both of us the energy to sustain
Yep.
and share your story. And I read that. I had read it before, but I read that this morning and it just hit me in a new way. And so I think this is the thing about your devotional book is it's so short. It's like if you don't have a lot of time and you just need a little bit of encouragement in your caregiving, it just gives you one little bit that you can hold on to every day. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate you taking the time to write all of this and to share all of this because I know God is working through you to help other people. And I want you to share, I know we've only got a few minutes left, but share more about the documentary, where people can watch it, because I think it's so important to understand the life of a caregiver. And so we can appreciate what they're going through and
Mhm.
maybe even step up to help somehow in whatever way God's calling us to.
Yeah, you can find out more information about the documentary at caregiverdoc.com. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get all the updates. We do free showings all the time. We have a free streaming week coming up here. I believe it's the week of February 21st, where you'll be able to watch it for free that whole week in honor of National Caregivers Day. But that would be the best bet to just sign up for updates so that you know when and where we have all the things going on.
So you can, because this will come out after that, unfortunately. But that was my biggest question. Where can they find it if they want to stream it somewhere?
Yeah, at caregiverdoc.com.
Okay, so
We offer free streaming quite often.
okay, all right. So that's where they need to go to sign up.
Yep.
And so I guess they can get your book on Amazon, any of your books, I guess, on
Yep. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, all the places books are sold.
okay. And is there anything else coming out or that you're doing that you want to share, or is that it for now?
We're hosting our first ever caregivers conference through the
Oh,
Lucas
wow.
Project, April 26th. It will be a day of rejuvenation, rest, relaxation, respite, all the things. We have world-renowned speakers, a comedian, a swag bag, a catered lunch, just everything to make a caregiver feel seen and appreciated. And tickets are on sale now. at thelucasproject.org. And in honor, or this won't really matter because you said this isn't coming out in February, but yeah, tickets are on sale now, and that will be occurring here in West Michigan in April.
Okay. You won't be streaming it though, right? It'll just be live.
No, we decided this is our first conference, so we're trying to keep it simple this first year, and we'll see how it goes. If it goes really well, we'll host another one next year and we'll stream that one.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. Well, Jess, thank you so much for all that you've done. Thank you for sharing your story, and your story and your life is an encouragement to me, as I'm sure it is to so many, that we can go through hard things and we can come out on the other side and still have that abundant life that Jesus promises us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.